My name is Joe Myers, and I'm with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is April 13th, 2012, and I'm in Sapulpa, Oklahoma, meeting at the home of Paul Bavousette. I'll be interviewing Paul today as part of the Spotlighting Oklahoma Oral History series of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Thank you for meeting with me here today, Paul.
Glad to, Joe.
Great. Would you tell me a little bit about your family and what your childhood was like? Did you grow up here in Oklahoma?
I was born in Oklahoma City in 1930, and I went to high school and graduated from high school, and then went to the University of Oklahoma in 1948, and I was there 2 years, and not having any spending money, I joined the reserves, Marine Reserves, and in 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea, and my 20th Infantry Battalion was activated and sent to Camp Pendleton, and we left Oklahoma City on August the 2nd of 1950.
Okay. So what year was it that you joined that unit?
I joined the reserves in June the 25th of 1948.
1948. Okay. And you, where was your boot camp conducted at?
I did not have boot camp.
Okay.
Because when I was activated, any member of the 20th Infantry Battalion that had 2 years of reserve training plus 2 years of summer camp were not required to attend boot camp. So they considered those 2 years of summer reserve and the regular reserve as sufficient training to be activated at that time.
Kind of like a OJT, on-the-job training.
That's right. That's
okay.
right.
Okay. So when your unit was activated to prepare to head to Korea, where did you ship to from Oklahoma City?
From Oklahoma City, we went to Camp Pendleton at Oceanside, California, and we were there 2 weeks doing several forced marches and snapping in on the rifle range. And then we went to San Diego and debarked from San Diego directly to Kobe, Japan. And I don't remember the date that we left the United States.
Okay. When heading from San Diego to Kobe, how long of a trip was that?
14 days.
14 days. Let's see. What kind of what was it like on the ships heading over?
It was a APA, which was just a personnel carrier, and very crowded. The type of ship that the metal bunks were stacked 5 high, and you lined up for chow in various groups, and you really didn't want to claim a bottom bunk when you got your rack, because on board ship a lot of the guys got sick, and if they were in a higher bunk and they leaned over and lost their meals, if you were on the bottom bunk, that was just a problem. But it was very crowded and monotonous.
Yeah.
And
what kind of was there any training on while you were on ships, or any kind of anything to do to get prepared?
Not a whole lot. Just some calisthenics, some rifle inspections. Details would clean the head, and it was just going from day to day to get over there.
Okay. Anyone needing to? From what I've read and other soldiers I've talked to, there was some like target practicing off the ships, that sort of thing for those who needed it.
To my recollection, we did not have any of that.
Okay.
Incidentally, the name of the ship that I went over, the APA, was the USS Noble.
USS Noble.
Noble.
Okay. So you arrived in Kobe, Japan. can you tell me a little bit about that, about your time in Japan?
Basically, we just pulled Liberty
Mm-hmm.
for about 3 days and just went from place to place. And there was some bad weather, which caused a little bit of delay, but it was primarily to load the ships
Okay.
for the Inchon invasion.
Okay.
I think, best I can remember, we were there about 3 days.
Okay. 3 days in Kobe. Tell me about your military job. When you joined the Marines, what was your military occupational specialty is what they call it these days, your MOS?
My initial MOS was 333, and my final MOS was 306,
Okay.
which was mortar unit leader.
Okay.
But in initially joining the reserves and training on the mortar, I was basically considered an ammo humper.
Mm.
Landing in Korea, I initially was an ammo humper also,
Okay.
but that changed.
Okay. And that was for the 81 millimeter.
81 millimeter mortar, yes.
Okay. Okay. Who were the men that you served with while you were there?
Well, I really don't understand that question. I can say that at the time that I joined the reserves on June the 25th of '08, I was going to high school with 3 buddies that lived close to me, and we would triple date and double date, and we're in the scouts together and so forth. And I was influential in convincing those guys that they ought to join the reserves at the same time I did. So we had consecutive serial numbers.
Oh.
And fortunately, when we got to Pendleton and we got dispersed into different units, these 3 fellows had also mortar training, and we were able to stick together in the same company and platoon. And when I came back, there was one guy that came back with me. The other one had come back earlier.
I see.
But it was just a group of guys from different reserves and regulars all over the United States.
Mm-hmm. They had an idea for that back in the, I think it was the 80s and 90s, called those Cohort Platoons. And they would be guys who came from the same, if not the same state, the same city. They were just kind of gathered together. So,
to my knowledge, we didn't have that in 50.
Okay. But now the 2 gentlemen that were with you there, do you recall their names?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm still in touch with them.
Okay. Who were they?
One was Dow McCarty, McCarty,
Mm-hmm.
and the other, who lives in Oklahoma City, and the other is John McCamey, McKemie, and he's presently living in Sun City, West Arizona.
Okay. And so both of those fellows were in the mortar platoons with you.
They were in 81 mortar platoons. One fella eventually got transferred to anti-tank,
I see.
but the other one did stay with me in 81 mortars.
I see. Who was it that stayed with you there in 81?
John McCamey.
John McCamey. Okay.
And we both made sergeant on the same day. And that was in 51.
I see. So you're in Kobe for about 3 days, roughly.
Yes.
Where did you ship from there? Where was your next destination?
Inchon
Okay. That was the
Landing.
Inchon Landing, kind of the left hook that MacArthur had planned.
That's right. That
Okay.
happened on September the 15th of 50.
Okay. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Sure.
Sure.
I remember coming down the netting on the side of the ship, getting into the LSVPs, and then going out and circling until they got the signal, and then like John Wayne, they headed into the beach and got up close and dropped the ramp, and we didn't run off firing our rifles like John Wayne did, but it was raining a little bit, and we got off and went in.
Was that a morning landing or was that a evening landing?
Best that I can remember, I would say it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 5:30, 6 o'clock.
A.M.?
P.M.
P.M. Okay.
P.M.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There were 3 landing beaches,
Mm-hmm.
and we were on the we landed on the Blue Beach.
On Blue Beach. Okay. And how long were you in Inchon?
Well, we were on the beach just overnight,
I see.
and the next morning then we started in towards Seoul, going through Yongdong-po, and best as I can remember, I can look it up. It probably took 3 or 4 days to get into Seoul.
I see. Once you were in Seoul, what was that like as far as you were trying to essentially push the North Koreans out of Seoul?
Exactly.
At that point in time.
Exactly.
What was that like? Was that house-to-house fighting or?
From my particular standpoint, no, because I was not in a line company.
I see.
Being in 81 Mortars, we were behind the line company, supporting the line companies with indirect fire wherever they needed.
Okay. So from where you were located, how far back from the line companies would you normally set up?
Oh, it would depend, anywhere from 2 or 3 blocks to maybe a quarter of a mile. I remember setting up in the vicinity of the railroad station in downtown Seoul and supporting. Our 81 Mortars backed up 3 rifle companies, Able, Baker, and Charlie. So it depended upon whether Able, Baker, or Charlie needed some support, but we had enough guns that we could back any one of those companies or all 3 of those companies up any time that they needed supporting fire, and that was usually received by SCR 300 radios.
And that was from the Fire Direction Center calling in?
From the forward observers to the Fire Direction Center.
I see.
I lost a good friend at that particular place that was from Oklahoma. Do you want to know about that?
Sure.
One of the line companies, the battery went out on his SCR 300, and I was designated to take a battery to him. And going through the railroad station, I ran into a fellow 20th Infantry Battalion reserve member of mine called, his name was Owen Crockett, OwenCrockett. And we hadn't seen each other since we had been there, and we were conversing, and a sniper caught him in the face. And I think the only reason that he got hit, he didn't have his helmet on, and he had red hair, and I didn't. So I figured they could draw a better bead on him than they did, but he lost his life there and at the Seoul Railroad Station.
Probably nothing that could have been done for him at that time.
I didn't go back and tell his mother exactly what happened because it was too gruesome, but I did tell her that I was with him when he got killed. But
sure.
No.
Sure. So how long were you you and your unit in Seoul?
I've got the information there on the length of time.
Okay.
Because after Seoul was secured, then we went back to Inchon.
Okay.
And boarded ships again to come back around to Wonsan.
Okay.
On the east side.
And this would have been the right hook coming around.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, coming around to
Wonsan.
Wonsan.
Funny thing happened there.
Okay, let's talk about that.
We were aboard some LSTs that had been sold to the Japanese after World War II. And going north towards Wonsan, we found out that Wonsan Harbor had been mined. And they were getting minesweepers in there to clean out the mines. So we couldn't land at Wonsan until those were cleaned out. And so the LSTs in the convoy would go north 12 hours and south 12 hours. North 12 hours and south 12 hours. We ran out of food, and we finally wound up with Spam, raw, baked, boiled, fried, you name it. That's the way we ate it. But we didn't go hungry until the mines were cleaned out. And I've got the dates there then as to when we actually did go into Wonsan.
So lots of spam dinners.
Lots of spam dinners. Yeah.
And lunches and breakfasts and everything else. How many days were they clearing for mines, do you think?
Well, you can look on there and see when we left Inchon and then when we landed in Wonsan. What are those two dates there?
Left for Inchon for Wonsan on 10/6.
Okay.
Landed at Wonsan on 10/26.
Okay, so you can see.
So 20 days.
20 days.
20 days to clear that harbor.
That's right.
My goodness.
Now that information is all backed up in this volume 3 of the U.S. Marine Corps History in Korea. That's where I got those dates.
I see. Okay, so once you land in Wonsan, what's the plan of action at that time? Once the Wonsan.
Of course, we were just following orders.
Sure.
But we were there maybe a day at the most, and we were ordered to go south to Kojo to protect a supply dump that was there from the North Koreans. And we were there, I'd have to look at my dates again, but we were there for a few days. We did lose some men. There were we were right on the bay, and we did have some men, not in my company, but some men that were there that were bayoneted in their sleeping bags. But we were there for a few days, and I've got some pictures of that, really. And then from there we went back to Wonsan and were sent to Mejani, which was up in the mountains. And we started up there by truck and got ambushed. This was at night. We had to turn around and come back. And in the dark and the narrow road, one of the trucks got too close to the edge, and the truck rolled over and threw a lot of the guys out. And I don't believe anyone was killed, but there were a lot of broken bones and so forth. We stayed that night, and then the next day we went back up again and actually got through to Mejani, and we were up there, I don't know, 3 or 4 days. And while we were up there, we were airdropped our winter sleeping bags. So we had those, and we also got our winter parkas up there. And then we came back to Wonsan and reconnoitered, and then started north up toward the Manchurian border per MacArthur's orders.
Okay.
And we finally did go as far as Chin Hung Ni,
Okay.
where we bivouacked for a few days.
Okay. That was leaving from Hung Nam to Chin Hung Ni?
Well, no, not Hung Nam.
Okay.
Hung Nam is where we came back after the campaign
I see.
and departed on board Navy ships.
I see.
So we went into Wonsan and then went north,
I see.
but then came back to Hung Nam.
Okay. So, talk about the heading up to, specifically to the reservoir. MacArthur's plan was to just push back the North Koreans at that point. Is that correct?
North, yes, but not primarily the North Koreans. It was the Chinese
Right.
at the time.
Right. Okay.
Force them back across the border,
Okay.
and I suppose, if necessary, to cross the Manchurian border into China.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the problem started coming with MacArthur and Truman.
Okay. And that Manchurian border was about 40 miles north of the reservoir. Is that right? Roughly.
I'm guessing.
Right in that
Yeah,
ballpark.
I
Okay.
haven't researched that.
Okay. So your unit is ordered to move forward to the Chosin Reservoir, and that's
Not
specifically.
Not specifically.
Okay. Where were you actually headed towards?
We were headed towards the Chosin Reservoir,
Mm-hmm.
up the winding road that leads to the reservoir.
Okay.
But ahead of us, already on the way and up there, were the 5th and 7th and elements of the 1st Regiment.
Mm-hmm.
Were up in the general vicinity of the reservoir and the reservoir itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the 31st Infantry Army was already on the east side of the regiment.
Yes.
East side of
East
the
side
reservoir.
Yes. Yes. So, can you tell me about that? About your trip up there, or heading north towards the reservoir?
Yeah, I've got a date there as to when our outfit kicked off from Chin Hung Ni, going up the road towards the reservoir.
Okay.
And it was snowing at the time we kicked off, and Lieutenant Colonel Donald Schmuck was the regimental commander at the time. Was the battalion commander,
Mm-hmm.
because Chesty Puller
Mm-hmm.
was the regimental commander.
Right. Right. So you were heading towards
North towards the Chosin Reservoir,
Okay.
up the road, the single road,
Mm-hmm.
single winding road that led to the reservoir and past it.
I see. And so I'm going to actually hand this back to you so you can have that to refer
Okay.
to. As far as your unit, you're with the 20th, right?
No,
Okay. Who were you with at that time?
I was with Weapons Company,
Mm-hmm.
1st Battalion, 1st Regiment,
Okay.
1st Division.
Okay. So the 1st Division was heading that direction, heading north.
Yeah, in fact, that was the only division that was over there.
Okay. So
But the whole division had been ordered north towards the Manchurian border,
okay.
on the east side of Korea, up into North Korea,
Okay.
up towards the reservoir.
Okay.
And my particular company,
Mm-hmm.
which was backup for the Abel, Baker, and Charlie Company
Mm-hmm.
of our battalion,
Mm-hmm.
left on November the 23rd.
Okay.
And no, I take that back. The reservoir battle started on November the 24th.
Mm-hmm.
We left Chin Hung Ni going north
Mm-hmm.
at 0200 on December the 8th.
Okay.
So the 5th and 7th had already engaged
I see.
the Chinese
At that point in
and
time.
needed some backup and reinforcement.
Okay.
But our first regiment was, you might call, in reserve
Mm-hmm.
at that time,
Mm-hmm.
with elements of our regiment already being up there.
Right. Right.
But then they knew that the problem was everything was hitting the fan,
Yeah.
so they needed about everybody that they can get. So our regiment then started north.
What are your first recollections of when you arrived there, where you set up near the reservoir?
We got as far north as a bend, sharp bend in the winding road just south of the blown Treadway Bridge. Now, I don't know if you're going to be covering that,
Mm-hmm.
or if you're familiar with what happened to the Treadway Bridge.
Yes, actually.
My particular unit got as far as a bend in the road
Mm-hmm.
just south of the Treadway Bridge where we set up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we set up, there really wasn't any setting up like we normally did, because the ground was so frozen that we couldn't fire our mortars accurately, because a base plate has some prongs on the bottom, and generally when you fire the first round, the back inertia sets the base plate in the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and with it being frozen, the base plate just bounced on the ground. So we really couldn't get any accuracy, but we did the best we could
Okay.
with what we had.
Okay.
And we stayed there firing for these companies. Also, to our right on Hill 1081, there had been quite a fight, and there were a lot of dead and or wounded Marines. And when we weren't in firing, we sent a lot of our guys up on Hill 1081 to get these guys down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, either fortunately or unfortunately, I was never in that group, because at the time I was in Fire Direction Center, and I needed to be with the guns in case we got a fire order that needed some calculations for the guns.
Mm-hmm.
So I stayed with the guns.
I see.
But we did leave Chin Hung Ni going north on December the 8th. And this was at 0200 in the morning
Okay.
in the snow.
So that went through Funchland Pass? The Funchland
We
Pass
did not
area?
go through that pass.
Okay.
That was north of the Treadway Bridge.
I see. I see. So you get to the Treadway Bridge, and it. Can you tell us a little bit about the Treadway Bridge?
The road going up to the Chosin Reservoir was relatively narrow. It was not probably any bigger than the width of this room.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's probably about 15 feet wide or
yeah,
so.
15, 20 feet.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a oh gosh, the Chosin Reservoir supplied generation for generate electricity.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a bridge that spanned a break in the road, and the Chinese blew that bridge. And since there was only one road going up and going back, with the Treadway Bridge blown, there was no more going forward or no more coming south. The Treadway Bridge was between 16 and 24 feet long, counting the abutments.
Okay.
And then there's more information about the Treadway Bridge if you want that.
Sure. That'd be fine.
When the 5th and 7th and elements of the 1st started advancing in the opposite direction, they couldn't go any further along with the equipment because the bridge was blown.
So they were coming back to the south.
From the reservoir area.
From Hagaroo, okay.
From Hagaroo and Udamnee.
Gotcha.
And so I can't be certain if it was the Army Air Force or who it was, but some, best as I can remember, either 7 or 8 bridge spans were dropped in our area. Several of the spans were lost down in the valley. A couple were bent, but they salvaged enough to span this 16 to 24 feet where the bridge had been blown out.
I see. Which
was used to allow the troops and what equipment that was still functioning to come back south.
I'd heard some stories about those abutments on either side as far as the spans, the things that had to be done so that those spans could actually reach across.
I've got pictures of those.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
No, I really can't. I just saw it and knew that it was eventually fixed by the engineers.
Okay. So you had gotten there on December 8th.
Yes.
How long were you there at the Treadway Bridge?
We stayed there, and the Treadway Bridge was installed, and then the division started clearing coming from the south on December the 11th. And we stayed there in reserve, and the 1st Battalion of the 1st Regiment brought up the rear as the last unit came out.
Okay. Did you have any direct contact while you were there on the Treadway Bridge or when you were set up in reserve? Had the North Koreans or the Chinese worked their way back that far? Can you speak a little bit to that?
Well, we could see them in person. They were that close. And of course we lobbed a bunch of shells in their direction and hoping we would hit. I can say that our position was ever overrun by Chinese, but they were close enough that they were within mortar range.
Okay. So are you talking about maximum or minimum mortar range?
I don't remember.
Okay. So maybe 300 meters, 400 meters?
If I said something, it would just be strictly a guess. I just don't know.
Okay. Part of the research I've heard stories of the how the Chinese would launch and the North Koreans would launch their attacks at night. Did you see any of that or hear any of that going on? Can you speak to that?
Dark, cold, snowy. During the day, snow. Planes could not help us because of the snow, but they liked to come at night because you couldn't see. But you could usually hear whistles, bugles, Roman candles or whatever. But we would, a lot of times we would fire some, lost the name.
Illumination rounds?
Illumination rounds for the guys that were actually on the front lines, where the Chinese were coming up so that they could see. And but we did fire a lot of illumination rounds.
Okay. What? How many rounds do you think you went through in the time that you were set up there in support?
You know, that thought had never entered my mind. We had assigned to us a weapons carrier with a trailer, and that stayed with us all the time. It was full of ammunition. But if we were going to be engaged in any major thing, we would try to get a number of trailer loads of ammunition brought up and stacked up in areas where we would have fairly easy access to them. But as far as how many rounds, anything that I would say would just be strictly a guess. 200-300, I just don't know. I just don't know.
And those were, as far as 81 millimeter rounds, those are 81 millimeters in diameter?
Yes. About 3 inches.
About 3 inches.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us about the different types of rounds that you'd be firing?
Various types. We had HE lights, which was a less heavy round, didn't have as much punch. We had HE heavies, which was a larger shell, heavier shell. We had
when HE stands for high explosive.
High explosive.
Right.
We had some TSQ, which stands for time super quick, that we could adjust the nose of it to explode above the ground for the shrapnel to go down, as opposed to hitting the ground and shrapnel going up. So we could fire it down. We had some illumination rounds, and we had what we call Willie Peter, WP, white phosphorus. And those were smoke and magnesium. And if some magnesium got on the person, you didn't want to pour water on it, because that just made it worse. So the only way you could get magnesium off of it was to dig it out.
That the water, and that's because the water would actually, the oxygen in that water would actually feed that magnesium.
Exactly.
Right.
But it was used a lot for smoke, also in the movement of troops.
Okay. So, on what date did your unit pick up and start moving south?
We probably started south about December the 12th or 13th. And the reason I say that is because the division started loading ships on December the 14th in Hungnam Harbor.
I see.
The Navy had accumulated a bunch of all kinds of different vessels, and the division started loading ships and leaving. And I can't say exactly what date we left, but it was, the division had cleared Chin Hung Ni on December the 11th, so it was between the 11th and the 14th.
Is there anything in particular that just kind of comes to mind about the Battle of Chosin that's a very vivid type of memory for you?
Several. Several things stick out in my mind. I not discounting the guys that we lost. The cold came to mind because it would at night would be between 35 and 40 below, not chill factor, actual temperature. The cold. A lot of the guys, when they did get hit, in some ways the cold was a blessing, because if they got wounded and it wasn't severe enough that they got killed, when the blood started flowing, it froze, which kept the rest of the blood inside. The corpsmen in the aid stations and all the medical personnel were just overwhelmed with that. Cold from the standpoint, we didn't have anything to build a fire with, and we didn't want to build a fire because it exposed our position. A truck came through that was loaded with supplies, and it had a whole bunch of Tootsie Rolls in there. And we would get the Tootsie Rolls, and since it was in sections, we could break a section off and put it in our mouth, and it would thaw, and that was, you couldn't, the food was frozen, your water was frozen, just very miserable circumstances happened. We probably lost 2/3 of our division from either wounds and or death and or frostbite.
My goodness. My goodness. Anything else? Any other vivid memories from that time?
Well, of course, at the time, we had no idea what was going on. We were in a particular place at a particular time, seeing what was around us, not knowing what was going on anyplace else until after it was completely over with. We found out what had happened, and then we just thanked the Lord that we made it out okay and alive.
Yeah. I know several of the other gentlemen I've spoken to and read about, read their accounts as well, talked about humanity, either good examples of humanity or bad examples, poor examples of humanity. Did you see anything like that?
Oh yeah, yeah. From a North Korean population, they were forced out of their homes, and they did a lot of clogging of the roadway going south. And in fact, when we got to Hungnam and evacuated, gosh, I've heard the figure, and I can't pull it off the top of my head, but it was well over 100,000, I think, civilians that were forced out with whatever they could carry. And the United States and the other countries helped get those civilians back into the South Korea and brought them back aboard the ships too. But the Chinese were merciless in taking care of civilians, and it just broke your heart. Broke your heart. And the children especially, that was just tough. Of course it was bad for everybody, but especially the children.
Yeah. Lots of orphan children on the road.
Oh yeah. But unfortunately you got pretty much reconciled to death and slaughter, and and things like that. I really have to hand it to those guys in the 5th and 7th. They just faced overwhelming odds. I didn't see that with my own 2 eyes, so I can't speak that as factual. I can only speak from what I have seen and read from a documentary standpoint. Mm-hmm. And those guys were in terrible shape and in a terrible position and performed admirably.
Yeah.
The 31st Infantry Army Unit, they were almost completely wiped out. But a lot of them did manage to cross some of the frozen ice, and they were able to get with the Marine group and came through the withdrawal. And I hate to use the word withdrawal. It was advance in the opposite direction type thing.
Yes. Yes. Did you have any injuries? Did you sustain any injuries there?
No wounds of any type.
Okay. Close,
but no wounds.
Okay.
I did get some frostbite.
Okay.
But not enough to disable me or to cause me any problem. Just from an uncomfortable standpoint, especially in the wintertime.
Is that on your extremities, your hands?
My
or your
feet.
Your feet.
Feet.
Okay.
I can speak to a particular weapon that we used.
Sure.
Our group were assigned carbines, and the carbine was lighter weight because of the weight that we had to carry. So that's what but the carbine in most of our mines did not function satisfactorily for 3 reasons. First of all, it didn't have the knockdown power that the M1 rifle did. Secondly, it was easily stopped up and wouldn't fire. And third, if there was any moisture whatsoever in the area of the safety either froze on or froze off. And you had to blow on it with your breath to try and thaw it enough to get the safety either on or off.
Wow.
So as time progressed, I think the majority of the guys would make a midnight requisition and would trade carbines for M1s because it would you just felt safer with an M1 than you did a carbine.
Sure. Did you have any contact with family while you were there? Get any mail or anything like that?
Yes. In fact, my fiancée wrote me every day while I was over there, and I would generally get 5 or 6, 7 letters at a time. What is just amazing to me now, sending letters or getting letters would take a couple weeks or so, and now over in Afghanistan or Iraq, they pick up their cell phone and they call direct or get on the computer and they email back and forth.
It's true.
It's just amazing.
Yes.
Just amazing.
Yes, it is.
We were issued long johns, uppers and lowers, and they came in 2 sizes, too big or too little. And I wrote my folks, and they sent me a pair of the old-timey long johns that was one piece that you got into with the rear seat.
With like a union suit?
A union suit. And when I got those, I put them on, and I didn't take them off until, it must have been February or March of the next year.
Wow, I'm 51. Wow.
But there wasn't any way of washing anything.
Sure.
So
sure.
You just kept what you had.
Right.
And boy, when you were up the reservoir, if you had to go to the bathroom, you had to do it in a hurry and take a chance.
I'd heard accounts of that, fellas having to go as quickly as possible and wherever they could.
Exactly.
So,
And if you were on the mountain and you had to have a BM,
yeah.
it just kind of rolled down the mountain as it steamed.
Oh my gosh. My gosh.
But you wore about 3 pair of trousers and sweaters and vests and everything else. Well, you were just bundled up because it was so cold.
Sure.
So you had to get rid of all that stuff before you go to the bathroom. So you didn't go to the bathroom unless you had to.
Yeah.
And I have heard that a lot of guys had impacted bowels because of it.
I imagine.
Yeah.
I imagine.
Yeah.
Was there anything special you did, or that you might have carried for good luck? I know a lot of folks I know.
Oh. Yeah. There's a picture I carried in my billfold of my fiancée, and just to the left up there is a bracelet that she gave me before I left. Wore that, and I'm a very sincere Christian, and I carried my New Testament religiously, and but as far as just wearing or carrying anything, probably those two things meant more to me than anything.
Okay. Did you keep a journal or a diary during that time?
No.
No.
But the letters that I wrote home to my folks and to my fiancée were kept, and I've still got those.
No kidding. No kidding.
This was all 62 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Where were you when the Korean War ended?
You mean the name of the town?
Yeah.
It was in no man's land.
Oh yeah.
But I was one of the last of my battalion to be rotated, and the reason was because I made it to Buck Sergeant, and I went down to the bottom of the Buck Sergeant rotation list. So I got my orders to leave on about October the 3rd of 1951, and by truck the group was taken down to Sokori, SOKCHO-RI, and we actually, after being deloused and turning in our equipment, except our sleeping bag, we left by LCVP to go to APA on October the 4th, 1951.
And that was headed back to Japan.
Went back to Japan, got back to Kobe, got aboard a train, went to Atsu, which was the camp of the Japanese Imperial Marines. Got my first shower in a long time, and some new clothes. We were there about 2 days. Took a train back to Kobe, boarded an APA, and I've got the name of it someplace, and came back. Took a couple weeks. Came back to Treasure Island, which was in San Francisco Bay. As I passed under the Golden Gate Bridge, I said, "I can swim from here," which I knew I couldn't, but I thought I could. Was in San Diego a couple days, getting haircuts and so forth, drawing my pay. Caught a plane directly from San Francisco to Oklahoma City, and landed in Oklahoma City on Halloween afternoon of 1951.
Wow.
In the midst of rain, sleet, snow, and hail.
My goodness.
And when I got off the plane, I cocked my head to the side so the snow and sleet wouldn't get in my face. And my mother thought that I'd been wounded and hadn't told her.
Oh no. So what did you do when you came back? Did you go to school or did you go right back to work?
Well, when I came back, I had 30 days leave, and I just did what any guy with 30 days leave does. Had my picture made, and then I was ordered to Hastings, Nebraska. There's a little guard company up there which was guarding an ammunition depot. And I reported up there on November the 1st of 1951. And I forgot to tell you, while I was in Korea, my enlistment ran out, and I got involuntarily extended for a year. But when I was sent to Hastings, Nebraska, I was up there and I got my discharge on January the 4th of 1952. Came back to Oklahoma City, went to Meyerding's jeweler and bought a set of rings, and my fiance and I were officially engaged on January the 8th of 52. I needed some money, so on January the 15th of 52 I went to work for Oklahoma Natural Gas Company in Oklahoma City and worked for them 35 years.
I'll be.
And then I started back to school.
Oh, okay.
Started back to school. Then I got transferred to El Reno, Oklahoma, which at the time was a long way away, so I couldn't commute.
Yeah.
But now it's 30 minutes.
Yeah.
but that was the end of my schooling.
I'll be. Did you join any veterans organizations after your service, like the American Legion or the VFW or anything like that?
No, I did not. The only thing that I joined was in 1984. I joined the Chosin Reservoir, and I've been a member of that continually since then.
Okay.
But unfortunately, a lot of the guys are dying or physically unable to attend functions, and it's going downhill, and it's a last man organization, so I just don't know how long it's going to last.
Yeah. How do you think your experience at Chosin affected your civilian life afterwards?
Well, I can't honestly say that I feel like that the Chosin experience by itself was a contributing factor as to how my life was. I would say the whole time that I was over there would be with that included, would be a major part. And of course, like any veteran coming home, any noise or I can remember after I came back, I was leaving Oklahoma Natural Gas and walking downtown, and a car backfired, and I just immediately just fell on the sidewalk. Just after our children were born, if I would take a nap on the floor Sunday afternoon and the kids were playing and they would jump at me, it would scare me, so they were cautioned not to do that. I do remember one time after my wife and I were married, we were in bed, and for some reason I heard this noise, and I woke up, and I had my left arm around my wife's neck, and I had my two legs wrapped around her body, and I was trying to choke her.
Oh my.
But that's the only time that has happened. But I'll probably have some flashbacks maybe twice a year. But it's never something that I've been through.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that might be completely different, or some activity where someone's coming in, or I'm in my foxhole and I can't maneuver my rifle around, or but it's generally never anything that I've already been through. It's something different.
I see. Is there anything that you'd like to cover, or that you'd like to add that we haven't covered in the interview so far?
Well, I know you were in the Army, but and I'm sure you know how Marines think. And I'm not an ex-Marine. I'm a former Marine.
Yes.
And I am so glad and thankful that I did pick that branch of the service. At the time, I would have traded it for a soft bed on the ship, or in the barracks to fly the next day. But now looking back, it's something that I really appreciate.
Awesome.